The last part of our morning is a panel. We want to speak with the winners of the World Class Awards this year, who are still with us at this point of the morning, and that is that would be Annabelle Langbine and Doug Cleverly, Sean Simpson, and Geraldine McBride. I'll start with a question for you, Doug, one of the members of the audience put earlier on this morning, and that is, have you considered Asia?
It's a question I get asked a lot. My only experience going to Asia resulted in our patented brand new IP product being fifth to market, and that was somewhat depressing. So we haven't actually gone back to Asia. We're sort of focusing on countries, I think, like South America and things like that. And we've had advice to go back in there, and we've actually had some people actually offering to assist. But I think Asia is an area where we need to start looking at, because we're into red meat, protein, and of course Asia's really getting back into that. So it's obviously a growth market. I think the removal from me from the CEO role will probably make that possible.
More broadly, there are a couple of questions we've had posed before this week, and I want to pose them again because your answers are so magnificent. And the first is will be familiar to you, and that is in the startup phase, how do you maintain motivation when it gets tough or overwhelming? Start with you again, maybe, Doug.
Yeah, sure. Well, for me, I'd come back from the United States and had a great job over there doing something I really loved. And coming back to New Zealand, it wasn't actually a job that was available for me. There weren't big companies doing cutting-edge research into brand new chemistries. That just wasn't happening here. So basically that meant I was completely unemployable. So the only way to get a job was to create a business in which I could employ myself. And that's what I did. I started a small research company. And it's quite pleasing to see on our website now there are 3 jobs that I actually would apply for. So it's quite encouraging.
Sean, maybe.
I mean, for me, I really enjoy what I do. I really enjoy what our company does. I mean, we often fail at what we do. There's been some extremely tough times. I'm very lucky though. We have an amazing team at Landsec. You sort of get an award like this, and it's really not a personal award. It's an award reflecting the work that our team has done, and so while there are tough times, in the end, you sort of you have the ability to turn back to the team and face something together. Have an incredibly supportive family. Sylvia, my wife's here today, and so it's really the ability to draw on everybody else's strength and sort of therefore continue to go, because I guess we're doing something that we're all very passionate about, and we don't want to be on the dole.
Annabelle, you haven't been a startup exactly, but well, yes, you have. You have initiated many exciting things. What's your approach to motivation?
I think it's not a matter of motivation to me, because I think the most important thing is if you start with something that really you're passionate about, that has to be the single most important thing. And therefore, it doesn't often seem like work, even though, as everybody's alluded to, there are a lot of 18-hour days. And I think I'd reiterate some of these other comments, and that it is so important to have support. I'm really lucky. I have a fantastic family who support me, and I know when we started the first series, we invested a lot of money, and we sat our kids down at the dinner table and said, well, this could go one of 2 ways. And if it doesn't go the way that we're thinking, then, we won't be going on those holidays again. And they were all behind what it was, the vision that I have, and I work with a really fantastic team. But I think one of the things that was an epiphany in a way for me this year was I always used to think it was going to get easy. And I thought that then, it's going to get easy. Do you know what? If you are a passionate person, you will always see the next mountain, and you will always see the next possibility. So it's never going to get easy. So if you accept that and make sure you've got a really good team around you, and do take that time out, I think something Catherine said about taking the time out when her family were young, I probably didn't do that, and that would be something I would exhort all of the other younger women in the room who are planning that to say, you don't have to be Superwoman. I think about people like Marilyn Albright, and she didn't even start her career till she was, 60, and Julia Child didn't start hers till she was 45. So if you can jiggle, there is always going to be a juggle, but as long as you still wake up and you're still excited by the idea, when you get really tired and really burnt out, I'm a great believer that you connect back to the land and go and dig some vegetables. You'll feel good again in a little while.
Geraldine, I didn't mention in the introduction, but you're working on a startup right now, and you did allude to some of the exciting potential you see. And I suspect that's your real motivation at the moment, isn't it? The enormous possibility.
Absolutely. I see that New Zealand is on the brink of a renaissance. I see that we are now the next lucky country. We're forward thinking. I think the younger generation we've got graduating who have already graduated, that's the generation that we are tapping into. They taught their parents how to use Facebook, and now they're getting on to other things because the parents are on Facebook, and now they're finding out all the other wonderful things that they can go that the parents don't know about. And that's the technology we are creating, which is the next generation. And in fact, we're targeting very much that generation because that's the generation that actually sets the trends. And they're the ones that are actually going to be... there was a wonderful article in Time, I think front page, was this is that generation. So I have a great deal of faith, actually, in the young people. I think that we are going to create a high-wage economy in New Zealand. There's a lot talked about minimum wage. It's not about minimum wage. Don't even think minimum wage. Think that when you leave school that you can start your own business, and we've seen some good examples of that today. And think that you can go and join Xero and earn, as a graduate, $50,000 a year base starting salary. Start to think big, start to dream, and you can turn your dreams into reality. That's what I'm so excited about New Zealand for.
I might stay with you, Geraldine, because you know what the next question will be, because I've asked it 2 times already this week. But I like the way you see the answer to it particularly, and because I asked, how are we creating a privileged class of people who we've spoken about this morning, who are able to be global and doing amazing things and flourishing, but don't seem to be all that numerous. You have the example of, say, the comparison of Kodak of a staff of 33,000 and Instagram of 15, and you wonder, where are the jobs in these new enterprises? Are there enough jobs for everybody? And so the thing I ask is, how do we ensure jobs for everyone in this transformed economy? What do you think?
Well, I think first of all, the New Zealand is a population of people. We are just over 4 million people, and we still have 45 million sheep, and we'll get really in trouble if our sheep got really smart. Thank God they're not intelligent. But on a serious note, what I found really interesting is I'm coming back into New Zealand, and I've been doing a lot of staying in touch with it through blogs and through various forums. The government's put forward a really interesting vision. How many of you have heard about the business growth agenda? Just a show of hands. Okay, that's actually more than there was in Wellington, so that would surprise me actually, but that's good. But what's interesting to me is that that's a 6-point plan around how we can transform and grow the economic base of New Zealand and actually increase our GDP by 10% and actually diversify and do all of the things. And yet I don't see enough being debated about in social media. There's not enough debated on the press, and it's almost not a national versus Labour question actually. It's almost one that transcends politics and actually is a plan that New Zealanders of everybody can come together, because we know we have the best lifestyle nation on the planet. We know we're the most free society on the planet, and long may we stay that way. But then the next question then is, how do we actually create wealth for everyone along with our lifestyle? Because our average salary is not high enough in New Zealand, and that's because we have been really good at creating services jobs. We're really great at growing primary produce, and we should keep doing all those things. But we can grow a high wage economy. And in fact, I'm about to go and do another speech this afternoon on this very topic, and Stephen Joyce is there as well, where we actually are talking about these things. And I think that's the question we should be asking ourselves. And that 6-point plan gives you some clues as to how we could do that. We need to get behind that as a country and as a people. And it's almost like we need grassroots social media to just get the vibe going and everybody actually, have an opinion on this and get behind it, because we create our own destiny for our children.
Sean, jobs for everyone.
Yeah, jobs for everyone. So I think, first of all, as I said, I think we should really strongly encourage entrepreneurialism. I think that's something that we don't actively encourage in New Zealand. It's almost like we take for granted that we're a country that invents and dreams up ideas, but don't actively come in behind and look at the ecosystem, look at the infrastructure that's there to support entrepreneurs in New Zealand. I think the companies that we see that are successful, that have come out of starting in New Zealand, are seen as, you know, that's how you do it. It's, you know, these companies did it, but when you go to other places, there's really active support for entrepreneurialism, real active support for people who are trying to start things, and I find it much less so here. The infrastructure isn't so mature here, so I think that's something we could really look to grow and invest in, and that's, for example, something that the Ice House are seeking to do. I would also say to everyone, look, you know, we're this very privileged place in the bottom of the world here, and our job market is everywhere else. You know, we can get a job here, yeah, sure, and that's great. But we can also go and get jobs elsewhere, and there is no barrier to us getting jobs elsewhere. I've worked in Japan, I've worked in various places in Europe, I've worked here, and those experiences all have enriched me and sort of allowed me to sort of think about starting a company here today. So I think, you know, we should encourage people to go out, work in different places, see what the world's about, but also think we should encourage people to start stuff here.
Annabelle?
Fab. Yesterday we had the same discussion, and this whole idea of apprenticeships came up, and I think that is a really important part of things, because then you pass on learning, and you can have people who may not be suited to go to university but are suited to a trade, and they can feel empowered and part of belonging to something. And I think that feeling of belonging is probably the most important thing. And, you know, in New Zealand I've done it with all of those campaigns around, whether it's the baggage handlers or the crew or whoever. And I think that, you know, for such a long time our distance from the market has been a huge disadvantage, and now it is to our advantage. And probably, you know, if you look, for me, especially for a country like New Zealand, how are we going to make sure that everybody has jobs? So much of it is about brand, because our country is perceived in the rest of the world as the clean, green utopia that everyone else is looking to for guidance about ways to live a better life and a lifestyle, and they look at us with envy, and we have to be really, really diligent about how we protect that and we manage that so that we are perceived. You know, we're not selling low-grade industrial food, we're selling the best food in the world, and therefore we can command the highest price for it. And everything we do is the best it can possibly be, and everybody feels that they want and need to be the best they can be at everything they do. And that way we just hopefully move everything up, because I know we're all here because we believe in this country, and I truly believe that will happen.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, I guess we're privileged because we are a research and manufacturing business, so there's a direct hiring of people, some 220 people in the last 5 or 6 years. So, you know, we're a direct employer. But being realistic, I mean, we will have to eventually consider decentralisation of manufacturing, which is why we're looking at plants in the United States. And the idea being, though, is to have the smarts based in New Zealand, because what is evident between our US research colleagues as part of our business and our New Zealand research colleagues is that the creative step will always be here. So the generation of IP will always be here. And what's interesting about the New Zealand psyche, and New Zealand psyche lends itself to that very, very strongly. Unfortunately, that psyche of lateral thinking, you know, and this disobedient, naughty thinking, it's great for if you're doing research and so forth. But if you're an FDA-regulated plant that you have to follow recipes to the letter, you don't want to be asked why every step. And it's taken a little while to sort of bring that culture of compliance into the organisation. But having said that, what we've identified is that in the United States we have a compliance culture in research, whereas in New Zealand we have this naughty, disobedient thinking culture, which is just perfect. So really playing to your strengths and having that creative step here means we're going to be hiring meaningful, you know, not meaningful jobs, but jobs with meaningful salaries, really high salary jobs, and perhaps outsourcing or decentralising the sort of the lower grade jobs, if you like, out into jurisdictions like Eastern Europe or America.
Last question for you all. The one thing you like about New Zealand that makes you optimistic about its future? Annabelle.
Only one.
Just the one.
We live in the most beautiful place in the world with probably the nicest people.
Undoubtedly. Look, for me, New Zealand is a completely unique place. Yeah, so we've got a population of 4.5 million people. It's about the size of the population of Greater Manchester, but we have all the industry and all the infrastructure of a country, and that lends itself to creating a very skilled and very entrepreneurial workforce in many ways. I mean, think about it. We've got 4.5 million people. We've got aluminium smelter, steel mills, oil refineries, dairy industry, various kinds of agricultural industries, and financial sector, etc., etc., etc. None of these things are found in such a small group of people anywhere else in the world. And so when I employ an engineer, that engineer in New Zealand, they're likely to have worked in the dairy industry, perhaps in the aluminium smelter or in an oil refinery as well. So they approach problems from lots of different directions. They've seen solutions in lots of different industries, and that allows them to come to our rather interesting puzzles with very well educated eyes, with eyes that have seen lots of different solutions, and you really don't get that anywhere else. You know, you go to the States and it's a nation of specialists. Everybody's the specialist on one valve in a refinery doing a certain thing, and they don't have that sort of helicopter view of processes and industries and etc. etc. So I think, you know, what gives me optimism is the fact that here there are this wonderfully eclectic, well-educated people that can be the spark for lots of different industries, lots of different entrepreneurial companies.
And I think just briefly building on Sean's comments, is that disobedient thinking. I think we need to keep that. We need to keep that in our schools. That's actually how entrepreneurs and new systems and new companies are founded. And when you start to think about the trends that I talked about today, you can tap in, you can start to conceive of different business models, different ways of doing business, redefining how business is done. Just because it's been done that way for the last 100 years, don't you think it's time for a change? And you can then start to reimagine how that can happen. That is the strength. So I think it's a mixture of our young people coming up who can reimagine this together with all of us as creative thinkers. And we can actually start to really, as we do, we punch above our weight today as a nation of so few people. But we can do even more. And I think what we've got to do is focus on this wealth creation. It's not bad to be wealthy. I think in the past we've always kind of gone back to our Calvinistic semi-socialist roots where we sort of kind of almost don't want to do that. It's actually not a bad thing to do well. Together with the great lifestyle, together with caring about our community and caring for the underdog. So we can actually do all of those things and create a nation that we can all be proud of as we take ourselves into the rest of the 21st century.
I think for me, it takes me back to about 1999. I was sitting in a presentation given by a head of legal counsel for Merck. And they're giving presentations around all sorts of aspects of different markets around the world. And they put this graph up and it showed the most corrupt to the least corrupt country to do business in, and it was with a huge amount of pride that New Zealand was number one. Not uncorrupt, but it was the most transparent and least corrupt country to do business in the world. And I just stood up and said, "Yeah, that's cool," and it just gave me a huge sense of pride. And I think that, you know, we're looking to use that as a means of differentiation and key competitive advantage, if you like, just having that in our business ethics.
Thank you, Doug. It's been a genuine pleasure to be on the road with you guys this week. The World Class Award winners, Doug Cleverly, Geraldine McBride, Sean Simpson, Annabelle Langvine, ladies and gentlemen.